Hello class. So I know you're just transitioning from writing, but we're going to go into social studies. So I'm going to play a quick transition song, and when it's done, I would like you all to be cleaned up and sit it on the carpet. Alright? Igneous. Alright. Thank you so much for being on the carpet. I love how you're sitting so nicely. Wow, thank you. Okay, so today we're going to be learning about an explorer whose name is Jean Ribault. Yesterday we talked about Hernando de Soto, and the day before we just talked about explorers in general. So right now we're going to go into learning about Jean Ribault, who is another explorer that came to South Carolina. Before we start, let's go over our I can statement. Class, can you please read this with me real quick? I can describe the motives, activities, and accomplishments of Jean Ribault's exploration. So we're going to learn about why he wanted to come to South Carolina, what he did in South Carolina and on his journey, and what did he accomplish, okay? Alright, so before we get into this, I have a quick question for you guys, okay? Have you ever been in a really hard situation? Like a situation where you had to choose between two things that you both really wanted, but you knew you couldn't have both. So then you just had to decide. And maybe you weren't happy, but you had to weigh the consequences and choose the best one. I want you to think in your head for about 30 seconds. And when you have an answer, put your finger on your nose. So just think about a time when you had to make a really hard decision. And then just put your finger on your nose when you're ready. I'll be watching. Oh, thank you for thinking so quietly. I love how I can see that some of my friends are ready. Awesome. Okay, so I want you to go ahead, now that most of you are ready, I want you to go ahead and turn to your shoulder partner or the person just sitting next to you on the carpet, and I want you to talk with them about a really hard decision that you had to make. When you're done talking with them, I just want you to sit with your hands in your lap and looking at me so I know you're ready. Okay? Igneous, go ahead. During this time, I would probably stand up and walk around the room, or walk around the carpet and listen to students as they are talking to their classmates. And I would probably let this go on for just a minute or two, let them kind of tell those stories, bring them back to the carpet, and have them answer one or two, have 2 or 3 students tell about what they were going to do. Okay, class, I'll have your attention back up here now. So it looks like most of you were able to share. I'm going to call on 3 students to share something their partner said. So think about what your friend said, and I want you to tell me what they said, okay? Miles, would you like to go first? And then, of course, Miles would share, and I would do the same thing for 3 more students. But I'm going to go ahead and continue. Alright, class, here we are. Come on back. So, we're going to use our social weekly, and I have it up here on the PowerPoint, but I'm also going to hand out your social weekly newspapers. So can I get my paper passer to come hand out these papers to everyone? Each pair is going to get 1 paper, and then you can go ahead and have a seat. Alright, here you go. While my paper passer is handing out the papers, I would talk about expectations for this time. So I'd say something like, okay class, when I'm reading, I want you to make sure you're sitting with your partner where you can both see the paper. And I want you to be following along and reading with me in your head, okay? Make sure you're seated properly. If you're next to a friend where you're going to talk a lot, maybe find a different friend. I want you guys to ask lots of questions and comments, but please raise your hand and don't just call out. Make sure you're raising your hand. And make sure you're just sitting respectfully so we can learn and go over this lesson. Alright, so my paper passers have handed out the papers, and my class is ready to begin. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and before we start reading, class, I'm going to show you a little bit about Jean Ribault's motives. So, glory. Remember we talked about in a couple lessons the 3 G's? Can someone tell me what those are? Wow, that's awesome. So right, we have God, glory, and gold. So Jean Ribault was really interested in glory. See, Jean Ribault was a Frenchman, and the French wanted to beat the Spanish and have their own settlement in South Carolina. Do you remember that Hernando de Soto that we learned about yesterday? He came from Spain. So France saw that. They're like, oh my goodness, Spain's already there. We have to go too. You can see over here it's like a big competition. Who can get the most land? Another motive that Jean Ribault had was God. The Huguenots wanted religious freedom. In France, the Huguenots are a group of people that had a certain belief. And when they lived in France, there were a lot of tension, and people didn't like the Huguenots, and they didn't like what the Huguenots believed. So they wanted to go to the New World so they could be in a new land and believe whatever they wanted, and they could worship freely. So he wanted glory and God. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start reading. Please look at your paper and follow along as I read. Spain and France were in a race to see who could settle the New World first. They both wanted to own land. The French decided to settle South Carolina after the Spanish failed. In 1562, Jean Ribault led 150 men to the present-day Paris Island, and they built a fort named Charles Fort. Let's go ahead. I have a map of Paris Island and where it is in South Carolina. So this is a map of South Carolina. You can see Georgia right there, and North Carolina's up there. And so he sailed to the very tip. He sailed all the way from France to the very tip of South Carolina to present-day Paris Island. And you can see right here is a picture of what Charles Fort might have looked like. And they named Charles Fort after the king, King Charles in France. Alright, so I'm going to keep on reading. We are right here. Okay? After a few months, Jean and some of the men decided to sail back to France for supplies. The problems began when Jean could not return to the New World right away. So here again we have problems that are beginning. When we think about the activities, you can think about this. So the men in the New World at Charles Fort, they were running out of supplies. They couldn't grow food very well. So they were starting to run out of supplies. So Jean took some men back to France to get some supplies and then come back and help the people at Charles Fort. But he never returned. The remaining men had to try to survive the best they could. They just had to do whatever they could to make sure they had enough food and try their hardest to make sure they could still stay alive, because they didn't know when Jean Ribault would ever come back. So it was probably kind of scary. Have you guys ever been in a situation like this? Where you've been in a situation and someone had to leave and some people had to stay, and you got to decide, and it's like a really hard decision? Kind of like what you guys told me about in the beginning for our first question. This is kind of what Jean Ribault had to think of. He had 2 situations to think of in his head, and it was really hard for him probably to make to decide who would go back to France, who would stay in Charles Fort. I bet it was a pretty scary time. Okay, so let's keep going. We're gonna read here at the men in South Carolina ran out of food. Their settlement was in a swampy area, making it hard to grow food. So it was like so wet and there wasn't good soil. Make sure you're reading along with me. They begged the American Indians for food. But the American Indians did not have much to spare. Things got worse. They're getting worse. That's crazy. When the storage building holding the few supplies they did have burned to the ground. The hopeless men decided to build a ship and go back to France. They had to use pine sap and Spanish moss to keep water from leaking in the boat cracks. So these guys made boats just the best they could with the resources and materials that they had. They didn't have like a professional boat making company or special tools. They just had to do it the best they could. So the men gave up. They're like, I guess Jean Ribault and his men are not coming back. There was no food or any supplies, so they had nothing to live off of. And the building burned down, so what little supplies they had was destroyed. They built boats and tried to return to France. Let's keep reading. So they used pine sap and Spanish moss to keep water from leaking in the boat's cracks. The sails from the boat were made from men's shirts. While floating in the middle of the ocean, the men ran out of food. They got so hungry, they ate their shoes. Finally, a large ship rescued them. The French settlement at Charlesfort failed. So they tried to go back to France, but can you imagine? They're sailing on a boat in the middle of the ocean. They don't probably know where they're going. They're just hoping they can get back to France somehow. And they didn't have any food. They probably didn't have any fishing rods, so they couldn't go fishing or anything. They were so hungry they had to eat each other's shoes. Can you imagine? Think about it just real quick. Think about it, you're on a boat in the middle of the ocean and you're just sailing along and you're so hungry. You don't know where your next meal is from. You don't know what's going to happen. You're so hungry and you don't know where you're going. You have no food and you got to survive, so you just start eating your shoes. Can you imagine what that would feel like? What would you do in that situation? I want you to think about it for a minute. When you're done, put your finger on your nose. And then turn and talk to your partner real quick about that question and what you think of the whole story. I'm going to give you guys about a minute, but think about it first. When I see all your fingers on your noses, then that means I'll know you guys are ready to go. So I'm just going to wait, take a moment to think. How would you feel in this situation? Alright, I see that most of you are pretty much ready. So again, I want you to turn and talk to your neighbor or partner and tell them how you would feel and what you think you would do and any other questions or comments you have about Jean Ribault's story. Alright? Go ahead. Again, during this time, I would stand up, walk around the room, interact with the students, listen to what they're saying, give some feedback, see if they have a lot of students have the same question. I would definitely address that when we talk back together. And then after I let them talk for a minute or two, just kind of get their thoughts out about the story, talk with their partner. Again, I'll call them back in, call on a few students to share their opinion, and then I will continue the lesson and explain what they're going to do next. Alright. So I see you guys are ready. I had some great conversations and some really good things you guys talked about. I'm really proud of you. Can I have one or two friends tell me something that their partner said? Not a whole lot because I want us to move on to our notebook pages, but just a couple friends. Can you give me an idea? So here I would listen to a couple of comments. I would encourage the students to build off one another. So like if one student said something that another student agreed or disagreed with, then I'd be like, okay, Tana, how would you agree or how do you disagree, and try to make it not just a back and forth but kind of around the whole group type conversation. And now I'm going to continue on. Thank you guys for sharing. That was really awesome. We're going to have more opportunities to talk about Jean Ribault as we do our notebook pages and different activities. But first, I'm going to tell you what you're going to do next, and I'm going to dismiss you to work independently, okay? So we read the story. You're going to use slides 28 to 26 to complete your notes and map. On the map, so this is your map, and these are your notes. This is the one I have that's labeled already, but yours, let me find it, will be blank, and you're going to label it. And you can see here, you're going to use the Google Slides to help you. You're going to go on Google Classroom, and you'll find this PowerPoint. And then you're going to scroll down a little bit to Jean Ribault, and you can look at the slides that we just talked about when I told the story. And then you can find the notebook pages. But you're going to see the map and the notebook pages, and that's what I'm going to have you guys fill out. And you're going to work with your shoulder partner. Okay? You can see, here's the map of where Charles Fort really is. You can just look at that. And then this is what I want you guys to label. So there's France. And there's Charleston, and I drew mine red, but you can use whatever color you want, and you're just going to color in France, and you're going to put a little dot, kind of estimate the best you can where you think Charles Fort is, okay? And then if you go one more slide, these are all of your notes about Jean Ribault that you can use to fill out your notebook pages, and you can also use the slides we talked about earlier from the story we read, and you can use your Social Studies Weekly to add in more information that might not be there. Okay, before I send you guys off, I'm going to share a fun activity that we're going to do. So if you guys finish your notebook page and your map, you get to choose a partner. This partner does not have to be your shoulder partner. It can be any partner you want in the class, but they have to be done with their map and with their notebook pages. Okay? So if someone's still working, you can't choose that person to be your partner. You have to find someone else. Does that make sense? Sounds good. So you can create a 3-minute skit about Jean Ribault and kind of talk about what we talked about. And you and your partner can imagine how they felt and kind of put on a little skit. It shouldn't be long. Just a couple minutes to make it fast. You can make a rap song about the French settlement in Jean Ribault. So, a quick, snappy beat. Or you can make a timeline poster to show what happened on Jean Ribault's journey. So I'm going to show you, this is my timeline poster. I made one of Hernando de Soto. So he's who we learned about yesterday. So I kind of said he's an explorer for Spain. He came to South Carolina in 1540. He looked for gold and slaves. That's what he was looking for. That was his motive. He met the Coahuilche Native Americans. He traveled all over the southeastern United States. He didn't stay in one place for very long. He kept traveling. And then he died before he could get back to Spain. So that's my timeline. And I'm going to leave this up here so you guys can look at it. I'll just leave it up here so you guys can look at it. Then I also made a little rap about Hernando de Soto. So I said, let me see if I can get the tune right. Hernando de Soto was a conquistador. He traveled all over looking for gold, silver, and gold. The Coahuilche was who he met, but he kept on going and explored all over. So just kind of make a catchy tune, a rhyme, a rap that explains about Hernando de Soto and what happened to him and the men at Charles Fort. And then if you want, you can also do a skit. So if I was going to do a skit about Hernando de Soto, I might talk about when he met the Coahuilche Indians. And so I could be like, I'll pretend I'm Hernando de Soto, and I'll be like looking, and I'll be with my men all around. I'll be like, men, I see something up there. Let's go explore that. They might have gold and silver or other valuables that we might need. So he marches up with his men, and he goes right up to the settlement, the fort, and he's like, hello, I am Hernando de Soto, a Spanish conquistador, and I am here to claim your silver and gold. And then remember the Indians. There was the lady of Coahuilche, and she brought him these like little pebbles and stuff. So she's like, here you go. Would this do? Is this what you're looking for? She hands it to him really nice and sweet. She's like, oh, here's some food for your men. You must be starving. Come on in. we'll give you some food. And then Hernando de Soto, he looked at the thing she gave him. He was like, this is horrible. This is not silver or gold. This has no value. And he just kind of throws it to the ground. And he throws the food, and he stomps off and keeps on going. So that's an example I just made up for Hernando de Soto. And if you have a partner working with you, one person, for example, one person could be Hernando de Soto, and one person could be the lady of Kofuchiki. Or if you're doing it about Jean Ribault, which is what I want you to do, one person could be Jean Ribault and his men going back to France, and the other one could be the men at Charles. I want you guys to be creative and do the best you can. But remember, do your notebook pages and your map of Charles first. Got it? Okay. When I say the word of the day, I want my paper passer to hand out my papers. And then I want you guys, everyone, to go back to your desks. Remember, when you're working on this, both people should be reading and looking at the slides, but you each have to write your own information. So I would suggest you read it, you talk about it, you decide what to write, and then you can each write it down. Sounds good? Okay. And make sure you're working together and doing the best you can. When I say the word of the day, I'm going to have you go back to your desk. I'm going to play a quick transition song, and then we'll get going on your notebook pages. Alright, there we go, class. Igneous. And during this time, I would be making sure everyone has papers and pencils. They're all ready to go. Net the carpet. Alright, the music is off, so that means your voices should be off. I want you guys to talk back and forth, but everyone's going to be talking, so make sure you use a quiet voice so it's not overwhelming to the whole class, okay? So now I'm going to step out. My mini lesson plus my hook should have taken about 20 minutes, and then now they'll have about 15 to 20 minutes to complete the notebook pages. So during this time, I'm going to go around and make sure everyone's taken care of, they have what they need, the basic questions are answered. I'll also make sure students like Claudia, table 2 knows to work with her. So like Kylie should be her shoulder partner, so Kylie should be able to assist her. And then Araya and Megan can also help out. Tanner, I'll have him kind of working with Kaysen and Wesley, so he can work with them and help them read and kind of keep them focused. And then at table 1, I will have them all work together, kind of helping Javon, because I know he can get distracted and just get bored real easily, so making sure he's staying on task and focused and the whole group is working together. And I might have to spend more time at that table just to make sure they're cooperating. So I'd have them work on that for 15 minutes. I would want to ask them a lot of questions. So let me see here. Some kind of knowledge and comprehension questions would be like, who are the Huguenots? Where's Jean Ribault from? What were the French looking for, like God and glory? And then some application and analysis questions that I could ask the individual groups of students would be like, and I kind of asked this during the lesson, but what would you do if you were Jean Ribault? How come it took Jean Ribault so long to get back to South Carolina, and how come like he wasn't able to return? Like, why do you think he was not able to return? When the men were running out of supplies, I can ask the students what they think the French should have done. So if they were running out of supplies, was it a good thing to send Jean Ribault back to France? Or should they have let him stay in South Carolina and all tried to work together? Or should have everyone gone back to France? They could answer that question. When they decided who would stay and who would go, I can ask the students kind of like, how do you think that conversation went down? If you were in this situation, who would you decide to stay or go? And then some kind of creation and evaluation questions could be like, why did the French have to make the hard decision that some men would stay and some men would return back to France? Or what could the French have done differently in order to make a successful settlement in South Carolina? So they came with 150 men and they tried to make Charles Fort. Maybe they could have found a different place, or took less men and then had reinforcements come later, or just ask them these ideas. And these creation and evaluation questions I could ask to everybody, but I'd be focusing on students like Tana, Kylie, Araya, Megan, Sophia, and other students just on that higher level that would be done with the notebook pages a lot faster. So again, I'd be working on them for 15 minutes. I'd be roaming around the room, making sure I give them feedback, answering questions. If I notice at any point I'm just getting the same question or comment from several students, I'm just going to pause, ring the chimes, gain their attention, be like, hey guys, I notice a lot of you are confused, for example, about did he accomplish his goal or not. So then I can be like, let's look back at the PowerPoint. Let me pull it up. He did not accomplish his goal. He had to go back to France. He did not come back. The settlement failed. The men came up. They had to leave. They had to eat their shoes. They were so hungry. And I would just kind of address it like that whole group, especially if I got a lot of the same questions. So after about 15 minutes, just because it'll be pack up, stack up, and clean up time, I'm going to call the students back together, and I'll ring the chimes, and I'll probably play another little transition song so that they have time to clean up and get back and focused. Also, during this time, some of the students may have had time to start on the 3 activities, so I would definitely be talking with them, giving them suggestions, giving them guidance on how that could work out. And I would have my little rap and my timeline posted up so students could look over and see it. We'll probably would work on this more in tomorrow's lesson, just because that will take students a bit of time and they need to fill out their notebook page. And then in tomorrow's lesson, I would also have them and their partner present what they had with the class. So if they had the rap, they would just come up and say it really quick. If they had the timeline, they would go over each step. And if they did the skit, they would talk about that and tell us how they did the skit. So I'm going to ring the chimes, call the students back, and then we'll go from there. Alright, class, it is now time to transition. It's about to be time for dismissal. So I want to give you guys a quick exit slip to test your knowledge, because I know you learned so much during this lesson. So I'm going to play a quick transition song. When that song is over, I want you to sit at your desks and just be ready for instruction, okay? Igneous. Alright, so our exit slip for today, there's 2 quick questions, especially the first one. The first one is, were the French successful in their mission to settle in South Carolina? Circle yes or no. And this one has the right answers on it, but I would show them this one. And then, so circle yes and no, were they successful or not? Give me 2 to 3 sentences to explain why or why not they were successful. So, if they were successful, tell me what you think, why they were successful. And if they were not, give me 1 to 2 sentences about, 2 to 3 sentences about why they were not successful. When you're done, I want you to make sure to write your name at the top so I can give you credit, because if you don't write your name, I don't know whose it is, so please make sure to write your name. And then turn it in the box over there. I want you to work on this independently, so this room should be absolutely silent. Okay? When you're done, go ahead and put this away, and then start cleaning up your backpack and your desk area. Make sure to be very quiet, because some students will still be working. When I say the word of the day, I'm going to have my paper passer. Would you come up here and pass these out to everybody? As soon as you get it, you can stop, and then when you're done, that'll be it. All right. Igneous. And then from there, I would pass out the papers and just have the students work on it independently. I would probably not give them hardly any feedback, because I just want to see what they know. And then when I got home, when the lesson was done and I got home, I would look at all the exit slips and see how they did, see if there's anything we need to address tomorrow, and just kind of give general feedback. So as far as the SCTS rubric, I have my I can statement up here that the students could see the whole lesson. I tried to make this, I can tell the mastery of the objective from the notebook pages, because this is straight from the standards. It's like